who are just joining us, thank you for coming. We're going to get started here in just a minute. I see people are already starting to join. For now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to kick off a poll just to make sure that you can hear me. So if you wouldn't mind just responding to this poll, letting us know that the audio is coming through. Okay, looks like we got a perfect score of everybody can hear us. We'll just give another 30 seconds or so before we get started. Okay, let's go ahead and kick things off for today. First of all, I want to say thank you all for joining. Looks like we've got a good size crowd today. We had more than, I think more than 75 people registered for the webinar today. So it's kind of exciting to see so many people interested in quick quoting. I know that's been a priority for Kalki Quote for a long time, and I'm glad to see that it's becoming something that people are interested in doing something about. So for today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with just a quick introduction. For those of you who haven't spoken to me before, my name is Chintan Sutaria. I'm the president and founder of Kalki Quote. Started working on quotes from a very young age and started Kalki Quote because I thought there's got to be a better way to handle quoting. So that's what we do. We do quoting for contract manufacturers. Specifically, most of our customers are high mix, low volume type customers, but you know, it kind of varies a little bit. In terms of what Kalki Quote is, if you haven't previously interacted with us or know what we do, basically we are a turnkey RFQ management system. And what that means is everything from the bill of material to the labor, the materials, costing, the margin and markup, being able to deliver a finished quote to your customer, that's the entire process that Kalki Quote handles. So that's everything from when a customer comes to you for an RFQ, all the way to when you are ready to send that quote back to the customer, and even until you have either won or lost that quote. So all of that stuff ends up being in the scope of what Kalki Quote does. If you haven't attended one of our webinars before, just to give you some background, this webinar is amongst a series of webinars that we do approximately once a month, where we're just trying to share some knowledge about how the industry functions, you know, things that we've learned as we have grown the business. We work with more than 100 contract manufacturers, so we get to see quite a few different things in terms of best practices and things like that. So that's what we're trying to share with you through these webinar series. Today is a little bit different than our usual approach, because we rarely ever actually talk about Kalki Quote through these webinars. Really, it's generally designed around industry best practices. And I'll qualify even today by saying that while we're going to be showing you how Kalki Quote can accomplish this task of quoting quickly, be thinking about, if you don't use Kalki Quote, how you could apply some of the same strategies and processes that we're employing to add efficiencies to your current process. And of course, if you do want to talk more about Kalki Quote, you'll have plenty of opportunities to talk to us. You know, find us on our website, and you'll have my contact information at the end of this as well. With that said, knowing that what the webinar series is about, and I mentioned today is going to be a little bit different, the point of today's webinar is to talk about how we can accomplish a quote quickly. And so if speed is the most important thing, what we're going to be looking at today is how this process would be a little bit different compared to if you were doing a long-term production, high-volume quote, right? So let's start talking about first, what is that difference in approach? And the primary difference is that you're going to be prioritizing a lot more. All right, so if you were doing a production quote where it was high volume, you know, every penny matters and you're very price sensitive and you're forecasting and doing all these other things, then of course you'd want to spend a lot of time on it. Your customer would probably understand that, hey, spending $1 million or something like that takes time, right? But for today's purpose, it's about speed. And so what I want to show you here is, this is kind of a very rough graph over here on the right-hand side. But the point of it is that you have to prioritize somewhere where your time goes, right? If it's a total value of $5,000 for the piece of business that you're quoting on, and you're going to spend 2 weeks quoting it, that's not worth anybody's time at that point, right? You've already spent more money than the total amount of profit you're going to get from that job. And so what we typically like to recommend is you got to find a way to prioritize. And this is one way, right? So you could say, if the total spend in material dollars or in labor dollars isn't above a certain threshold, then we're going to focus on being quick rather than being thorough. That's one example, but as we go through this process, you're going to see a few more of these as well. Okay, so let's talk about one other thing here, just some housekeeping items. As we go through this, you will see a Q&A box in your webinar controls. Feel free to use that to ask questions. As we're going through this, I don't mind answering those questions, but there's a catch here, which is the setup for today. We've added a little bit of interesting twist to it. So Mike, who is co-hosting the webinar with me today, he has picked amongst 4 bills of material that were submitted by our customers. So we reached out to our customers and said, hey, if you want to give us a bill of material that you've had issues with in the past, or you've tried to quote before, and you want to know how would we best recommend handling this. So we got 4 bombs submitted to us, and he has picked one. I have not yet seen it. I haven't looked at it at all, but he has prepared that to send to me. So for the purposes of today, Mike is my customer. He sent me a bomb. I haven't looked at it. He also said that of the 4, most of them were too easy for me, so he was intentionally trying to pick one that would be a little bit more difficult. Keeping in mind that bombs come in all different shapes and sizes, you might have other scenarios that you've encountered. We just picked one for today, but that doesn't mean to say that this is a comprehensive demonstration. There's always going to be one-off exceptions and things like that. And then the final twist for today is Mike came into work today with a pie, a banana cream pie, and he said that if we can't accomplish this in 60 minutes or less, he is going to pie me. So that's going to be part of the fun for today. You're not going to see that live because I'm wearing a shirt that I like and I'm sitting on carpet, but if we don't accomplish this, you'll get a fun little video in your email as well along those lines. But otherwise, I get to eat the pie, so that'll be kind of nice too. Okay, so we're going to primarily, the other thing is we're going to primarily be focusing on the material side, because while the customers submitted bills of material, obviously for confidentiality reasons, things like that, we didn't ask them to submit assembly drawings and Gerber files and things like that. So keep in mind that while we're focused on the material side of it, we will cover some of the other aspects of it. And then as we're going through it, like I said, ask your questions, use the Q&A box. I'm happy to answer those, but at the same time, I may wait to answer some of those later just because I don't want to get a pie in the face. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to switch gears here a little bit, and we're going to open up Kalki Quote. And let me just close out this poll over here. And I'm assuming everybody can still hear me okay. Oops. Let's go over here. While I'm doing this, so I've pulled up Kalki Quote over here, and like I said, we're going to go through using Kalki Quote as an example for speed of quoting, but just to get a sense for where the audience is at, I know we have quite a few customers already on the call as well, so there's names I definitely recognize, but there's also names I don't recognize, so I'd be curious if you can see this poll right now, if you wouldn't mind answering how you're currently doing your quoting, how you currently like to process quotes. That'll give me some context of how in-depth I need to be. Okay, we've got about 20 responses already, and it looks like 50% Kalki Quote, 50% Excel or other quoting software or custom software. So we're at about half-half. Okay, that's good to know, just because it gives me some context. So it's possible, I would assume, that some of you have never seen what Kalki Quote looks like. I'm not going to be going over all the different bells and whistles of Kalki Quote today, but we're going to be using Kalki Quote. So if there are questions about what a particular function does, what a button does, things like that, we can get into that a little bit as well. Okay, I'm going to end that poll and share the results. So you should be able to see what those results look like now. Okay. And let me do one other thing here. So I'm going to share my video so you can see me doing these quotes. And let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to start. I'm logged into Kalki Quote already, and I've got a bunch of quotes in here. What I want to do is I want to start a brand new quote. And so I'm going to say new RFQ over here. And I'm going to click on new RFQ, and I'm just going to start capturing the details of the quote, right? So Mike has already sent it to me. And Mike, I'm going to ask you a couple questions as I'm going through this. So be prepared to answer some here. So this is a turnkey quote. I'm going to go with, this is a new job. I'm submitting the RFQ on behalf of my company here. The quote was given to me today, and Mike wants it back right away. He wants it back first thing tomorrow morning. So I'm going to put that in there. I've got it expiring within 30 days over here by default. And then over here, I'm going to say, since Mike is working for Kalki Quote, I'm going to say that. And I don't have Mike in the dropdown over here, so I'm just going to add Mike as a context. I'm going to say Mike Turner, and I'm just going to put his email here. Okay, so I've got Mike as my customer contact over here. Okay, Mike, what is the name of the assembly we're quoting today?
Topo Chico 1, 2, 3, 4.
Topo Chico. I think I spelled that right. Okay. And then what quantities do you want me to quote?
500, 1,000, 5,000.
Okay. Sounds good. So I've captured that information over here, and I'm just assuming 4 weeks after receipt of order. Is that okay?
That works for me.
Okay, sounds good. So I've got that in here, and just to show you guys, Mike sent me the BOM that we're going to be working with over here, sent it to me about 20 minutes ago, and I haven't opened it yet, just it's sitting over here. So I'm going to be looking at that as we go through this. So what I'd like to do is go ahead and submit and go to uploading the bill of materials. I'm going to submit and upload the BOM. That takes me to this BOM screen, and now I have to upload my bill of material. Before I upload the BOM, I'm just going to open it and check for formatting issues, right? So let's pull up the BOM over here, and I've got my bill of material here, and it looks like we've got a pretty clean bill of material from what I can tell over here. And what I'm going to do is just go through and just validate a few different things, right? So the first thing I want to validate is I've got some manufacturer part numbers over here, but they're in columns. And I want to just convert this into a more tabular format, right? This is a little bit harder for me to work with. And so what I want to do is convert it. So first things first, I'm going to just move all of these columns into rows. So you're going to watch me go through some Excel things kind of quickly over here. Just bear with me. I don't want to get into the nitty gritty of how Excel works over here, but I'm just going to populate, I'm just going to transform this into a more tabular format, okay? And I'm going to use my own shortcuts to do that. So I'm going to select the blanks over here. And then, whoops, I'm just going to populate that with something over here. And then what I like to do is just copy and paste that down. And I'm just going to repeat this for all of the different rows. So if you can't tell what I'm doing, basically what I'm doing here is just moving all of the columns into a single column. Okay, and that should have gotten me where I want to be. So I'm going to delete all this stuff on the right-hand side because I don't need it anymore because it's all pasted below underneath. Okay. The other thing I want to do, this just looks a little bit messy to me, so I'm going to try to clean it up a little bit. So I've got some DNP parts over here, which is fine. I've got, let's see, some places where the manufacturer part number is also missing, which I want to address over here. So let's start with this. This is the PCB. So I'm just going to put in a part number for that PCB, just so I've got something here. And we're going to call that call it PCB 101527123. Okay, so that's my PCB over here. And then if I go down a little bit, I've also got, let's see, this is a drawing, that's fine. And then this is, what is that? It's an IC. So I'm just gonna, again, just use the customer's part number over here. And then same thing for this one, I'm going to use customer's part number. Now, I'm not sure if this is just the programming of the IC or, so if it's a phantom part or what, but that's what I'm gonna go with for now. Okay, now I've got a bunch of other things at the bottom over here. So this is my manufacturer 2, this is my manufacturer 3 going down. So I'm just gonna clean that up a little bit. I'm gonna select all. All right, I've got everything selected. Put filters on. And the first thing I wanna do is remove this, as well as all of the places where I had manufacturer part number over here. And I'm just going to delete all of this. Oops. Okay, and now I have my different part numbers. Now, the other thing I want to check is I saw some things down here where I have multiple part numbers inside of a single cell. So I just want to split that out. Now, if this was a large bill of material that had a lot of cases of this, then I would spend a little bit more time doing this in a more automated way. But for now, I think I just see it in the last 2 rows or so. So I'm just going to do that part manually. So let's do that real quick. So I've got 3 different parts here and 3 different parts here. So I'm just going to insert this. And if you want to know how to do this in a more automated way, I'm doing it a little bit manual right now, but if you want to know how to do this in a little bit more automated way, then you can always, we just did a webinar, I think a month or 2 ago, about how to clean up a situation like this. So I'm going to remove that over here. And this one, oops. I'm going to remove this. And this one, I'm going to remove this. Okay, so I got that one done. And this is ABX. This is audio. And this is, okay. And then same thing with this one, I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm going to go in here and remove this, remove this, and remove this. And this is Chemet, and Bishop. Okay, so we got that in here, and I just want to make sure, so 62 and 63, I'm going to remove that from anywhere else that's there too. So, okay, I've got that cleaned up, and I don't see too many other big issues over here. We'll discover more if there are any later on. So let's go ahead and I'm going to put a filter on this. And I just want to combine everything by line item so I can see it all together. And now I've got it in a more tab. So I can see I've got line item 18 on 2 different rows with 2 different part numbers. I was looking at 62 and 63. So I've got those down here as well. So I'm good. Okay, so this should get it into a place where I'm ready to import it in. Mike, did I miss anything important on this bomb?
Not that I saw now.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and save this. I'm just going to call this CQ format customer bomb. And let's go ahead and move that out of the way. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drag this bill of material in. So this is my CQ formatted bomb. I'm going to drop it in. Okay, so that gets my bill of material in here, and I just have to map the columns from my Excel file into here. So I'm going to map that in. I've got my manufacturer name over here, and I don't want to leave these squiggly lines. So that's fine. We had some do not purchase stuff over here. In Kalki Quote, we just call that false. So I'm going to say, yeah, anywhere where it says DNP, mark that as false. So we're doing that. We got a couple other errors over here. So there was no quantity on this. So let's go back to my bill of material. Did I miss something? Let's see. Okay, I don't see a quantity over here. So I'm going to go with 61 was one IC, so, or one, whatever it was. So I'm going to say, okay, 61 is one. And in fact, let me do this. I'm going to just populate the reference designators over here so I can compare it. Okay, so this is 2 per board, and this is 1 per board. Okay. And then we also, I think, had a customer part number. I'm assuming this is the customer part number, so I'm going to put that in. I'm not sure what the difference is between the reference part number and the other part number. So is it okay for me to assume this is the customer part number, Mike?
Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. So I'm going to go over here and call this the customer part number. Okay, so I've got my customer part number in there as well. And if there were any notes, which I don't see any notes in here, so I'm good with that. So let's go ahead and import this. Okay, there we go. I've got it all imported into here, and I can see over here I've got part numbers, grouping, and things like that. So I feel pretty good about the way this looks. So I'm going to go ahead and submit this. And then I'm going to start material costing. So I've got a bunch of different suppliers over here, and I'm going to check off a couple others as well, and I'm going to go ahead and submit this. What this does is, I'm not going to switch to labor right now, just to explain a little bit what's going on here. This is going through every little manufacturer part number that we've got over here and every quantity that we've got. And it's just looking for pricing and availability and information like that so that we can make sure that we have some options to pick from. So while that runs, and we should see it starting to make progress in a second over here, once I see it starting to make progress, I'm going to switch gears. I don't have to wait on the screen. I'm going to go over to the labor and work on that. We'll give it a second just to make sure it's running. Okay, looks like we're at 5% and it'll keep going. So, and I can see that with the circles spinning on the left as well. So I'm going to switch gears. Let's talk about labor. So the way that we've got labor set up over here, and this is our demo system, so it's a little bit simplistic, but if I had an assembly drawing, essentially what I'm doing is coming up with, oh, I see a question in here about can we add custom mapping? That's a good question. So when we imported that BOM, it actually does a good job of remembering different mappings that you've done in the past. So it actually learns as you go. And so what ends up happening is if you had called something QTY instead of quantity or misspelled quantity or something like that, then that would all show up. That would all be available to you to have it remember that over time. There's another question over here about why didn't you assign any part classes? When will attrition be assessed? So I'll say that there's two different ways people do leader and attrition and things like that. For today's purposes, because I don't have a lot of history, I haven't ever done the part classification, I skipped that step, but you could go through and classify the parts and assign leader and attrition and things like that as well. It's just that the demo over here is not set up for that. Okay, so with that, I'm going to go talk about labor for a second here. So I've got a bunch of labor activities over here on the left-hand side. Like I said, I've kind of kept it a little bit simple because I can't imagine all the different scenarios and machines and things like that that everybody in the world would have. But this will be pretty configurable. What I'm going to do is I have my common labor items over here that typically apply to every build. And then I have another group over here, which is my exception stuff, right? So and I can create different groupings like this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the common things. I'm going to say all of this stuff applies. So I'm going to add that across. I'm going to say, okay, it's telling me that it takes 30 minutes for the first job and 3 minutes to format the BOM per line item, and it knows how many line items there are. So this is all looking fine for now. If I get into the SMT part over here in a second, so it's saying, okay, SMT machine setup, this is where it would be a little bit, I'd probably spend a little bit more time making sure that I've got the bill of material and I've identified how many SMT line items there are versus through-hole line items, and if they're passives or actives, things like that. So there are some options to do those types of things in here, or I can just go in and I can say, well, approximately this is going to be 45 SMT line items, and if I go back to my Excel over here, what I like to do is just keep it a little bit simpler. Again, if this was really high quantity or something, of course, I'd spend more time on this, but knowing that total count over here is 305 line items, 305 component placements, I'm going to go ahead and assume that about 90% of that is SMT parts. I'm going to say 270 SMT parts. Maybe I miscounted. Sorry. It's telling me that there's 125 total placements. So 90% of that would be like 110. Okay, I've got 125 over here, through hole. So I'm going to say that there's maybe 5 through hole over here. Okay, so I've got a bunch of different activities added down here, and I'm going to add in wash a couple more times because I think as I go through this process, I'm going to have to wash it multiple times. I'm going to put that in as well. And if I wanted to, I can move it around. So I could say, okay, the first wash happens after I do pick and place, and then another one happens after I do touch up, and then the final wash after, right before QC. Okay. So I've got my laboring here, and I'm going to go ahead and submit this. And that takes me back to material costing. So let's see how far along this is. So we're almost finished over here. While we wait on that, anybody else have any questions for me? Give it a second over here. Clear out this polling stuff over here as well. Okay, and while this is running, I'm just going to go in here and show you. So I've got the PCB right here. And one of the things I want to do is I want to send this PCB out for quote. So obviously it's not going to be automatically priced. So I'm going to say add to bid sheet, and I'm going to say I need the bid back by tomorrow because that's when this quote's due. I'm going to say please provide PCB quote, and I can actually go into, if I have a grouping, which I do. So I've got PCB groupings over here. So I can say, okay, here's my 2 different PCB suppliers. I'm going to send it to both of them. So I got Peter Charles Bart the second, both work for this company, PCB supplier. And I've got 3 people over here, 2 of which looks like the same, working for Dunder Mifflin. So I'm going to send that to my PCB shops and save it. And that's created these 2 bid sheets. Now I could also attach my Gerber files. So let's just pretend I've got Gerber files. I don't in this case, but if I wanted to, I could say, this is my Gerber file. Let's upload that in as well so that when my supplier gets the quote request, they can download the Gerber files. Okay, so there's a question over here from somebody about how often are the costs updated in the system? Is it automatically updated if and when changes are made? So when we clicked that update pricing button, when it started doing the search, that's the time at which that search was conducted. And so that's when you'd have that information coming in, right? So if I click into here and I see a bunch of different options over here, then I can see if I click over here, for example, on Mauser, then it's showing me today that there are 68,685. And if I compare that over here, you can see it's the same number. So it is a current search. It's not like we store this and present to you old information or something like that. It's actually pulling that right then and there. Okay, so I'm not going to save that. Okay, so I've got a bunch of stuff over here, and I want to send out these bid sheets. So let's do that. So I'm going to send all bid sheets, and that's going to go out to my 2 suppliers so that they can start working on providing me a quote back. And then what I'm going to do is start going through and providing some selections, right? So up to this point, all we've done is search for pricing. We haven't yet gone through the process of selecting for pricing, right? So I've got some criteria that are important to me, so that's what I'm going to focus on. Don't know if this is stuck or what's going on. Okay, so this has been sent out. That's good for me to see. And then I also don't want this part number over here. It's a PCB. I don't want that to get confusing. So what I'm going to do is just select this, and I'm going to say clear everything out of there for now. I don't want anything to be in there. Okay. And I can see there's an hourglass icon over here as well. It's telling me that I'm waiting for bid sheets to be returned from these two vendors. Now I'm going to go through and select. So I'm going to click on auto select. And we have a couple different options over here. So I've got, these are kind of the easy buttons. This is time sensitive, price sensitive. So do I want it fast or do I want it cheap? I'm going to go into more advanced selection criteria here. And I'm going to say, let's go with, I care about on-hand quantity is greater than my requested quantity. And I care about, maybe I want to limit my excess material dollars to be less than or equal to, also go with $25 over here. And I'm going to go with my most preferred suppliers first, and then I'm going to go with the lowest total price. Okay. And I can choose different criteria for different quantities. So if I said I only want to do this for 500 pieces and then do different selection criteria for the other quantities, I could do that as well. But for now, I'm just going to run it for the whole thing and see what happens. My guess is we'll have some selections happen at the 500 and 1,000 that wouldn't have happened at the 5,000 just because of limited stock. So we'll give it a second here for it to run through everything. Okay, so that's run, and we've got about 72% of the BOM has pricing, but you can see like this line item right here, we had selections happen over here. It shows that DigiKey was selected, but nothing was selected over here. My guess is that when I go into this, it'll be likely due to the fact that there's not enough stock, right? So I needed 5,000 pieces, and it looks like in this case, DigiKey only had 3,000 and nobody else had more than 5,000 pieces. So I'm going to say, okay, that's fine. I understand that that's how it works sometimes. And I'm going to go back over here and I'm going to run auto select again. And I'm going to find my previous criteria, except this time I'm not going to filter for on-hand quantity. And I'm just going to run it on the remaining lines. And that should take care of filling in some of these other blanks as well. Okay, looks like we got a little bit further, so we're at 88% now. That makes me feel a little bit better, and I'm just going to do a quick sanity check to see what else is missing over here. Looks like there were some parts that just weren't found for whatever reason, so we might want to address those, but it's only like a handful of those, right? So I'm okay with that a little bit more. So let's do this. I'm going to go in and let me just check this one out real quick. Let me go to Google and see if I can find out what happened there. I see some results coming in from a bunch of different places, but none of the primary suppliers that I want to see from. So I'm going to say, okay, this one is potentially an issue. And then we've got a few others over here, probably in the same boat. So I'm going to say, okay, that's fine. Let's go in and start looking at reviewing some of this information, right? So I'm going to click over here. Got some unpriced lines over here that I'm going to address in a minute. I know about those. I didn't have any target pricing that I imported, so I don't have to worry about negative target price variance. I do want to look at my leading cost drivers over here. So to the question from earlier about leader and attrition, this would be a way that I would start to consider leader and attrition. So if I had default attrition set up in my system, then I would be able to go in here and say, oh, this is a really expensive part. I'm going to adjust my attrition on this component rather than all the way through on all my defaults, right? There's another question here. Is it possible to search from a custom source, for example, a price list? Yes, it is. You can upload your own data feed, so to speak, into here. I won't get into the mechanics of how to do that. It does get a little bit more technical on how you set that up. But the short answer is yes, if you had a list of components and the price and the quantity and things like that that you wanted to upload into here, you could do that at the quote level, or you could do it as a global thing. For example, if you had obsolete inventory or something like that. Okay. I'm just going to look at a few different things over here. So this is my cross-matching, and I just want to make sure that, okay, these all look fine to me. I had Kemet. It's just, maybe there's something at the end that's indicating packaging or something like that. So I'm okay with most of that stuff. I'm looking at my excess material exposure, and I see that I do have some excess material exposure, but it's not a whole lot, right? I'm okay with the threshold that I've got over here. So I'm going to leave that alone as well. If I wanted to adjust any of these, I could go in and I could say, okay, I don't like the $23 of excess this is giving me, and I'm going to pick something else, right? But for now, I'm okay with this. I want to look at lead time risk. This is showing me wherever I have issues with lead time. So I've got a few parts in here where there wasn't sufficient stock, and so I want to do something about that. So this one I'm going to mark as being at risk. So I'm going to say material at risk. Limited availability on lead time. Save that. And I'm going to do the same thing on this one. Okay. All right, so I've marked that at risk as well. Okay, so now I'm going to, and if I just confirm that, I can go here and I can see I marked these two as material at risk. Okay, so now I'm going to go back over here. Let's find all of my unpriced lines. So I'm just going to sort this a little bit. And these are my unpriced lines over here. So I'm just going to select these. And for our purposes, I could go out and start finding pricing and key it in, right? So I could go in here and I could say, okay, I did my own research on this part. And I could say, add this, and I'm going to put in a supplier name over here. So I'm going to say, this is my supplier, and the price that they've quoted me is $1, and I could save that, and then just apply that across the whole quantity, right? I could do this for all of these parts, but I don't want to spend the time going through each of these. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this back to the customer and say, I don't want to guess about what part number this is or whether this is an authorized source or anything like that. So I'm just going to edit this part. I'm going to say part not found from primary suppliers. Please suggest alternate or prove using next tier suppliers. Okay, so I've done that. Okay, there is a question in here about what about customizing variables like MOQs, obsolete, last time buy, packaging size, standard lead times. This auto select functionality that I was showing you, there's quite a bit of functionality in here. This screen looks relatively unassuming, but it's probably one of the more complex screens that is in here. So the short answer to your question is, if it's logically possible for us to do that, then this screen would be able to handle that. But things like obsolete and last time buy and things like that, that assumes that we have the information about last time buy and things, and we don't always have that. So I would say a good indication of that is if no supplier is returning things, then that's usually a good indication. But that's not always the case. So yeah, those are the types of exceptions that would need to be managed. Like I know, for example, like the Xilinx part, I might have registered pricing on that. So I might say for this one, I want to send it to my supplier and get my registered pricing or something, or ask the customer what the pricing ought to be at because they've negotiated a deal directly with the manufacturer or something. Okay, and then I've got my PCB over here. These aren't real suppliers, so I'm just going to go in and populate my PCB price for now. I'm going to say PCB supplier has given me a price of $15, and they're saying that it's going to come in a panel count of 10, so it's going to be 10 PCBs per panel. Actually, let's make it a little bit more interesting. I'm going to say 15, and here's why. So I'm going to say it's 15, I'm going to save that. And so what that means is if I wanted to build 500 units, then I have to actually buy 510 because it comes in panel count of 15. I'm just going to apply that all the way across too. except as I go into higher volumes, I get a discount. So I'm going to say 15 and then 12 and then 8. Now I've got my PCB price in there. Okay, I feel pretty good about this now, and I'm going to go ahead and submit this. Let's get to the NRE. So I've got a few standard NREs that I like to add in. So I've got, let's say, a stencil NRE. We didn't say we were going to do conformal code or test when we did the labor, but the PCB company had come back and said, oh yeah, there is a $500 NRE charge for that. So I'm going to just put in some options over here for the NRE. I'm going to submit that. And then we're going to get to the summary page. And this is where I'm taking my material costs, my labor costs, and I'm going to be applying a markup, right? So this is a roll-up of everything we've done up to this point. And I've got my material cost over here, and I'm just going to apply, just to cover my basis, price fluctuations, shipping charges, attrition, things like that. So I'm just going to apply maybe a 5% markup. I'll do 10% at the lower level, and then I'll do 7 and 5 over here. Okay, so I've got some cushion over here on the material cost, just in case something were to change between now and when the order is placed. So I don't have to go back and nickel and dime over all the little things. And on the labor side, I've got my setup cost and my variable cost. And so I'm going to apply a similar sort of markup strategy over here. So I'm going to say for 500 pieces, I'm going to mark that up. I really want to incentivize the customer to be in this middle tier right here. And this is where your pricing strategy comes in, right? So this is no longer about costs, it's about pricing strategy. And so I want to incentivize them to be in this middle tier. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say at $20, I'm going to mark that up quite a bit. I'm going to mark that up 100% and make it double my labor cost, because I don't want them to buy the 500, I want them to buy this. And then I'm going to say for this one, it's going to be a more reasonable amount. And for this one, it's going to be even more reasonable. And then I'm going to put in some allowance for commission over here. And that gives me my final price that I'm going to quote the customer. Okay. Now, the way you do your markups and things like that could be different. The way you allocate your overhead might be different. And this is all set up according to our demo system. But the point is, you could do any of those things. Okay, and that gives me some metrics down here as well. So I can see, okay, I've got total revenue over here showing good. That's increasing as the quantity increases. If I look at my margins, that's decreasing, which is what you'd expect, right, as the quantity increases. So I feel pretty good about how this is working out. So I'm going to go ahead and submit this. And I have a little bit of excess in here, right? So $155 here, $108 and $113 here. And when I'm spending $62,000 or $100,000 on a PO, I don't want to worry about $155. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just amortize that excess into the unit price. So right now, if you look, it's $125.54. I'm just going to amortize that in, and it became $125.86. So it increased the price by 30 cents, but I'm comfortable with that, knowing that the customer is not going to want to deal with $155 of excess over here. So I'm going to submit that. And now I'm onto the quote page. So I've got my assembly information over here. I've got my NREs. I can put in some notes over here, and the terms and conditions, depending on how you're doing your quotes today, you either have standard ones that you include on everything, or in Kalki Quote, it can dynamically build up depending on the customer and the job type and things like that. So I'll say the terms and conditions, I'm not going to get into all of that, but for the note, I'm going to just say, thank you for your business. We had several parts were not found. We are still researching alternative supply sources. I'm just going to save that. This is me just letting the customer know, hey, you wanted this next day. So we did the best we could within the time frame you gave us, but we're going to keep working on this and come back to you, sharpen our pencils a little bit, that kind of thing. Okay, there's a couple of questions here. Sorry, I missed these. Can you set line cards between manufacturers and suppliers, and can it choose them automatically? Yes, is the answer to that question. Does the supplier respond on the portal? Yes, they have a login where they sign in and they would see these bid sheets and they would respond to the bid sheets right there. So you're not emailing spreadsheets back and forth. It's a little bit more secure and a little bit easier in terms of data manipulation because they just download it on their side, upload it on their side, and you would just see it appear right alongside those other results we had. Good questions. Okay, and I didn't do the risk assessment here. I just skipped it because, again, people's QMS systems are different. So I'll defer to your quality manager to decide how your risk assessments happen. But I'm gonna go ahead and publish that quote. And let's just take a look at it. I wanna include the exception report as well. I'm gonna download this. Mike, how are we looking on time?
Pretty good. 15 minutes to go.
All right. So I've got my finished quote over here and I'm just validating, making sure it looks like how I want it to look. And just for your reference, if you were using Kalki Quote, it would be your logo, your colors, your taglines, your customer's name, your names down here, things like that. And then you've got this material exception report. So remember from our BOM, we had some parts that were DNP. So that's showing over here. We had some parts that we no bid because we said part not found from primary supplier. So that's called out over here as well. We had some that we marked as material at risk. So that's showing up here. And we had some cross matches where we added suffixes and things like that. So that's showing up as well. Okay, so I've got my finished quote. I've downloaded it. And now I can write an email if I wanted to and attach that to my email and send it over to the customer. I'm going to mark this as sent. And I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to follow up with Mike. This is a hot lead for me. I'm going to follow up. If I send him the quote today, then I think I can give him a call first thing tomorrow morning. And I'm going to say, this represents about 100,000 in revenue for me. I'm going to say, call Mike to see if we are close on the budget. Ask follow-up questions about the obsolete parts. And I'm going to save that. I'm going to keep the bid sheets open just in case these suppliers respond back to me. I want to be able to consider them when I actually make the purchase decision. Otherwise, I could say, no, this is a closed deal. We're over with this. I'm going to keep them open for now. And that way, when I sign in tomorrow, I can see down here, this is my Topo Chico assembly, and it's saying that on this date, I'm supposed to make a phone call to Mike. And that is it. Now, because we did everything in one system, it's end to end. So I could go back and I can look at metrics about this, right? So I can say, okay, how many live quotes do I have? What's my win ratio been? How many are running on time versus late? That kind of thing. So I've got quite a bit of information here about just how my RFQ process is performing as well. Okay, that's it. Anybody have questions for me? This is kind of the Q&A time. And maybe we'll enjoy some pie.
Slicing it up now.
Give it a few more, a couple more minutes to ask any questions. Just from, maybe we can do like a thumbs up, thumbs down thing, but was this helpful to you guys? Was it, did you learn something? How would you like us to be able to demonstrate these types of things in the future for your benefit? Okay, there's a question over here. How accurate are the lead times? I think the best way to say that is the lead times are as accurate as they are provided by the suppliers to us, right? So I'm aware, as I'm sure whoever you are that is asking the question is aware, a lot of times if you go on the suppliers' websites and things like that, the lead times aren't perfectly accurate. That's pretty much the same information that's coming into Kalki Quote. So it can only be as accurate, garbage in, garbage out is kind of the philosophy here, is if the lead time is accurately provided by the supplier, then we are accurately presenting that to you. There's another question here. Is this going to be recorded and shared in case we would like to show our team members? Yes, it will be. It is. Yes, it is recorded. I thought I forgot to record it. It is recorded, so you will be able to show your team members. Yes. Let's see. There's Oh, and sorry, one more thing to that. So you'll get an email after the webinar with that recording link and all of that. The other thing I would say is if you want to have a more specific use case, if you want to do a proof of concept with your own bill of material or something, feel free to go to our website. There's a demo scheduling button there, and you can use that to kind of do a one-on-one. You can ask more detailed questions about your use cases. Okay, there's another question here. When benchmarked, how accurate does the system tend to trend to a good/accurate quote versus a bad quote? I'm not sure I understand the question. Maybe if you could provide a little bit more detail about what you meant by that, what you mean by a good accurate quote versus a bad quote. I'll say that if you're focused on speed, the API results are kind of the best way to go. If you're focused on being a little bit more price sensitive and things like that, what I generally recommend is do a first pass with the API results that I just showed you, and then also send out the bid sheets so that you can focus on the high prior, going back to that chart we had, right? You can do a first pass and figure out where you are in terms of approximate price. And then you can say, okay, these are the ones that I need to be actually thorough on, and send those out for bid sheet. There is a question here. So we win the quote. Can you give an output example of what we would have available for our MRP/job system? Yes. So you can go in here and this is my QuoteCQ board. You can, on any one of these screens, in case you missed it, at the bottom over here, there is an export option. So you can go down here and you can download costed BOM so that you can go ahead and place your orders. Now, I will caution that, depending on how long it's been since you completed the quote, the pricing may not be valid anymore, right? And that happens sometimes. Prices change, and that's not up to Kalki Quote. That's up to you and your suppliers. The pricing over here, you can see all of that detail does show up in here. It's a pretty large spreadsheet. You can build your own output as well. But the point is that, yes, you can export this into a spreadsheet. Okay, there's another question here. Kalki Quote seems to be an online app. Is it available as a desktop app? It is not available as a desktop app. It is only functional through your browser. There's another question here. Is the API access already set up for us? So as part of your onboarding, Mike's coming in here with pie. You're not gonna smash that on me, right?
I'm not. It's
okay.
Still a little frozen.
Okay, good.
Just wanted to let you know. I'll be ready for you later.
Okay. Is the API access already set up for us? So we've already done the work of integrating into those suppliers that you saw. All we would need to do is get an API key for you, which is pretty easy to do. We've got more than 100 customers using Kalki Quote. So even from the supply chain side, they're pretty used to us requesting these API keys, and there's a good rhythm to that. So typically it takes, depending on the supplier and the process they have in place, anywhere from it being instant to it being a week or two of wait time while your account gets approved. Let's see, usually CMs have some specific prices for parts based on annual purchase. However, we need to log into distributor site to have access to those discounts. Does Kalki Quote support this? The short answer to that is it depends. Some suppliers through these API connections are able to provide contracted pricing and things like that, and other suppliers are not. So I would say it depends on your account with the supplier as well as the supplier and their ability to do that. Can we update the market prices on demand is a question. So let's go back to where we were over here. If I wanted to refresh this, for example, I could do that very easily. I would just click on update pricing again, and I would just rerun everything again, right? So that's an easy thing to do to get the latest information. Generally though, because this is a quoting system, what I would recommend is clone this whole thing and then clear out the pricing and rerun it rather than just clicking the refresh button. But I've seen it done both ways. Oh, and it looks like the next question is along the same line. So if it's been 30 days from quote to win, can you refresh the data prior to order conversion? Yes, you can do that. But again, what I recommend is clearing it out and then running the update pricing and doing the auto select if it's been an extended period of time. Now, if it's only been a day or two, then generally you can get away with just using the same thing. But if it's been 30 days or more, then I generally recommend just redoing that because especially these days, pricing is relatively volatile. Things could have changed, availability could have changed, things like that. Can we add custom columns for data that needs to pass through your system into our MRP system? I guess it would depend on the custom column. There's already a lot of columns in here. We do have many customers that use this in terms of, I've done the quote, now I want to get a kickstart on my purchasing. So that is a possibility, but we'd have to understand the use case a little bit more. What I can say is that this is designed to be a quoting solution, right? It is not designed to be a replacement for your MRP. It's not designed to be a data mining operation or anything like that. It's really just designed for, I have a quote that I need to get back to a customer, and that's it. What I will say is we do have another product that we're calling QuoteCQ, which is the purchasing arm of Kalki Quote, right? So, and it's still in beta release, so it's still pretty early stage, but what that is designed to do is I've got an MRP feed or something like that that I want to link into this type of system so that I can be a little bit more efficient. Think of it like a workbench maybe, where I want to be a little bit more efficient about how I research market pricing and things like that, as well as place purchase orders more efficiently. If on any of these questions, if you think I misunderstood your question or anything like that, feel free to send another message in and say, oh, this is what I meant to ask. Yeah, okay. Let's see. What does the cross-match parts do? Can it show us alternatives? You do have the ability in some cases to see alternatives. So let me find a good example here. It works much better on passive parts, as you can probably imagine. So let's find, I'll try this AVX part over here, right? So I'm going to go in here, I'm going to say suggest alternates, and I'm going to say, let's get it from DigiKey over here. And if I do that, this would be the equivalent of if you go to like DigiKey's product page and you see a bunch of different suggested alternates, that's what's showing up over here. So I've got a bunch of different parts over here. I can add these in if I wanted to. So these are different versions of the same part, or maybe the original part can be substituted with this one. So I'm just adding a few of these in here. So you can see over here at the top, and it says the status is pending, which means that this still needs to be approved. As a contract manufacturer, as you can probably imagine, it's not up to you to decide the bill of material, it's up to your customer. And so over here, what I've got is I've got my 2 original parts that are in white, and then I've got 3 parts that are in blue, which means that they're still pending. And so what I could do from here is I could actually send this as a link to my customer to provide approval on these. So if I wanted to, I could say, okay, let's send this out to my customer and have them approve the alternates. Can the system labor variables be added if not already in the system? Masking, curing. The short answer to that question is yes. Basically, the labor module is extremely flexible, so you can do a lot of different things with this. I'd have to understand the specific use case and how that works, but we've done another webinar on how labor modeling works. And so ours is an activity-based or a routing-based labor model. So as long as you can assign a standard time and a driver and a labor rate to that process, then the short answer is yes, you can do any number of activities. Okay, let's see. We got another question here. Can we open data sheets form? Can we open data sheets from the supplier's website? Is there a link? So on any one of these results, these are linked results. So I can actually click over here and it'll actually take me directly to TTI's website. And then usually, TTI, for example, does have a data sheet over here. So you're about 2 clicks away from that. Got another question over here. Looking for this to be the front end of my MRP data. That would be kind of a unique use case. In terms of where you want the reference designators and things like that, that's the question. Sorry, let me rephrase the question here. Let's see, it says, I'd like this to be the front end of my MRP data, and can I include reference designators in a column or part class information? The short answer is yes, you can include reference designators and part class information, again, without knowing what your MRP system is or how that works in terms of what fields it requires. we'd have to get into a little bit more details about your specific use case. I would say that would be an abnormal use case. Most of our customers use this for quoting to get quotes done quickly. Okay. Any other questions? I think we've got like a minute left here. So if there's no other questions, I'll put my contact information up again, just so you've got it. Feel free to reach out. This is my contact information. You can also go on our website. We have a little chat box there that we typically reply within a couple minutes. So you've got several different mechanisms to get a hold of us, and we're happy to talk to you in a little bit more detail about this. Let's see. Okay. We've got one lingering question, so I'm going to go ahead and answer it, but if everybody else doesn't want to stick around, that's okay. I appreciate you guys making time for the webinar today, and stick around next month. We've got another webinar. If I remember correctly, I think that one is in partnership. We're going to be talking about, we're talking with Aegis about how to add automation and efficiency to your front-end processes. So that includes quoting, but also a lot of other things just to make sure that manufacturing runs smoothly afterwards. Okay. Let's look at this final question over here. We have a complex Excel worksheet for labor calculations. Do you offer services to help us convert this into your system? Are there any limitations to the calculations related to work center labor? First part of your question, yes, we do offer services to decipher your labor worksheet and turn that into a Kalki Quote model. We've worked with more than 100 contract manufacturers to do that. So I feel pretty comfortable that we're able to handle that. The second part of your question, are there any limitations to calculations related to work center labor? I guess we'd have to see what those limitations are, right? So it makes more sense once we get into your specific use cases to see if there are limitations. Of course, with any system, there are always limitations. I just don't know if those limitations would be relevant to your use case. Okay, with that, I'm going to go ahead and close this and take a long drink of water and maybe eat some pie. Thank you all very much for joining, and we will be talking to you again next month. Have a good day.